That's really amazing. I'm
Yours
really, really
came
happy to
up
see
when,
that.
on the main page when I hit on, like when I hit writing, it came up
Oh yeah, look, there it is.
once.
That's so
Oh
cool.
my God, wow.
Oh man, that's so cool. I'm so happy about that.
Right. Well, guys,
That's
you're
amazing.
going to learn in this session how to create a GPT, and we're going to try and help you create one that's going to suit your business.
Okay, so I want to show you something really, really cool. So if you Google topical authority generator, you will see that my GPT is first on Google, which is really, really cool.
Wow. Oh my God.
Um, the reason I kind of wanted to talk about this in this live stream is because you can use this to rank on Google, and it's really, really hot right now. That when someone clicks here, there can be a link to your website, and it is a backlink as well. It's probably no follow, but backlink from ChatGPT is still a backlink from the ChatGPT website. So not only can you make something that can do something for you, you can rank it on Google, and other people can use it, and that can bring traffic to your website, to your business, whatever it might be. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of read through this and give extra thoughts on it, etc., etc. I just wrote this now. So custom GPTs are enormously valuable because they allow you to give much more context or specific context to ChatGPT and make it take on a persona much more effectively, meaning that the ChatGPT you interact with is specifically designed to do a certain task. So this is different from giving ChatGPT instructions and then asking it to follow those instructions. You are changing the scope of ChatGPT and saying that all of the stuff that you've learned, you need to realize that this is what you're doing for me. And then the whole like framing of the conversation changes. That's why custom GPTs are so powerful. They use the new version of the ChatGPT API, the Assistance API, and the way it works is simple. So when you actually press save here, this is the first call to the ChatGPT API. This already makes a call and this creates an assistant. You can do this in the playground as well. You can do all of this stuff in Python as well. So I'm going to go through these points one by one in a moment, but let's just finish how this actually works. This is the one that is on the store, which is really cool. Now, when you message it, this creates a new thread. Okay, so now this is a message to ChatGPT, and the first message will be creating a thread, and then you send messages in the thread, and the context is based on the instructions that you have given it. So that's sending messages in threads. The amazing part of creating an assistant or custom GPT is that you can attach things like files and even have it use code interpreter to run code. This makes your ChatGPT context window much more specific and allows you to do things you couldn't really do before, such as consistently making excellent content. This is probably the best thing for me about assistants or custom GPTs. One of the most difficult things about ChatGPT when you're just using ChatGPT is getting consistency. Even using custom instructions, even using really specific instructions, even using prepping, a lot of the time the end result is not what you want. Using assistants, because you're changing the whole framing of ChatGPT and like its whole existence has changed, the consistency is much higher. That's the main reason that I like to use custom GPTs. And I use them inside ChatGPT just because it's a lot easier. Using them in Python or using them in the playground is just a little bit more complicated. I don't really like using it in the playground either because you can't copy the content very easily. So how can we use them? If you can think of a task that you do quite a lot and cannot get ChatGPT to do it perfectly every time, that's a great use of a custom GPT. A great example of this is my topical authority generator. I'm sure many of you have used the topical authority generator. I think it's one of my best custom GPTs by far. This one here with the Phoenix logo that Dali made for me.
I want to say something on this because I used
Sure.
it the first time last night.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked it to create a topical authority on the last set of, blogs that I had created, which
Mm-hmm.
I already had the keywords that I wanted to use. And it
Mm-hmm.
picked out almost verbatim the exact keywords that I spent 2 days researching. 2 days in the 5 seconds.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I can say for sure that this topical authority generator comes up with very, very high traffic results that actually will get searches because I'm in the classic menswear niche. So when I made that video, when I made this, I based it on classic menswear and I could see from the results that it understood the task perfectly. But if you try and do the same thing inside ChatGPT with like a long, complicated prompt, it won't have the same result. And that's because it's the framing, the whole framing of the conversation with ChatGPT has been completely changed because it's no longer ChatGPT GPT, it's almost like your own custom model. Great example of this is my topical authority generator. You can ask ChatGPT to give you topics on something. You could ask ChatGPT, but it'll always be limited. If you use my custom GPT, it gives you much broader, in-depth, and SEO-rich examples, but still completely relevant to each person's specific niche. A lot of people have said that this custom GPT has given them so many keywords in such a short amount of time. It's like being able to put a piece of your own, I want to actually change this to your own brain into a custom robot, which if you understand SEO well, obviously, then you can make good robots, but all of mine are open anyway, so you can just tweak mine if you want to. I would encourage you to still make your own GPTs and learn about the process and learn about prompt engineering, and thanks for that. Right.
Just supporting you here from
I'll
afar.
just make that Sora as well.
Thank you. It's wrong font size, mate.
It's the wrong font size. Now, another thing we can do is prepare for the potential of custom GPTs becoming incredibly popular. And if you're on the store and have a lot of people using your custom GPT, another use of it is actually a potential income stream in the future. So I want to talk about this a little bit, but I know it's kind of breaking the fourth wall or whatever, but I do think it's important that people realize that they're probably going to pay per conversation that someone has with your GPT. And I've already shown you that you can rank on Google with a custom GPT. So if you're looking for an income stream and you're kind of decent at prompt engineering, which hopefully after today you will be, I would highly recommend looking at like something in your niche, something that you know about, something that you can really add value to, and making a custom GPT that people can find and packing the SEO, which I'm going to show you how to make the GPT anyway. So I'll show you how to pack the SEO into the description and things anyway. So individual parts of a custom GPT. There are a few parts to this. So we'll go to edit here. We'll use the topical authority generator as an example. So the first one is name. Now you might think, I should probably change this name actually. This name is, it's only important if you're trying to rank on Google. If you're just making your own private custom GPT, then you can just ignore name and just write whatever you want. If you're not trying to rank on Google, then just ignore description, just write whatever you want. It doesn't matter if it's just a personal thing. If you are trying to rank on Google using custom GPTs, which again, I do highly recommend people explore as an avenue to bring interesting new traffic to your website. Yeah, think about something in your niche. I think DubG, your example is a really good one. Like, I don't know, like a debt advisor or, a divorce debt advisor or something like that. Maybe try that and see if you can bring some traffic to your website.
Considering I only make really dumb GPTs, my GPTs are dumb. My lawyer was, pretty much the exact version of that. So yeah, that should work.
Hamish, just a question.
Yeah,
just
sure.
that maybe people are asking. How are we going to do this session? Are you going to build one in real time?
I think maybe people can build their own while using what I've got here. Would probably be better.
Cool.
So name is only important if you're trying to rank. If you're trying to rank, just stick the keywords here, stick the keywords here. It's literally that simple because you're just piggybacking off the SEO of ChatGPT. Now, the instructions are obviously the most important part of this. I'm going to open Excel draw for this actually. Okay, so you need to think how a robot could solve your issue. I know that might sound weird, but you have to remember that it is a robot at the end of the day. It's not that smart. I would say the number one thing is you have to think of a process that it can follow. So step one, come up with idea. Step two, research idea. Step three, add business details for write the article. So instead of trying to do like one big prompt, which was really popular back in the day, but I never really liked it, it's better to have digestible steps for the custom GPT to follow. This is the general idea. So you have to think about how you could explain to a robot these simple 4 steps. And then on top of that, you then have to explain to the robot again how to do these 4 steps because it's a robot and it's stupid. So you have to repeat yourself You have to have several ways of saying the same thing, and you have to test. I probably, when I'm prompt engineering, I'll do like 30 generations until I actually have what I want. And that can just be tweaking one word, tweaking loads of words. Sometimes just removing one word can have a huge difference on the whole thing as well. You need to digest the information to a robot. And just remember, it's almost like when people say when something goes wrong with a computer, it's your fault. It's the same with prompt engineering. If something goes wrong with ChatGPT's output, it's your fault most likely. Except in some circumstances, it's probably a word, or you're trying to write it too complicated, you're trying to be too intelligent. You just have to be clear and concise, but then also repeat yourself like 50 times because it's ChatGPT.
Just remember, Hamish, it's not the AI's fault, Hamish.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So you should hear me arguing with my AI. I'm not even kidding.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
I literally argue with it. I call it an asshole about 100 times a day. Yeah.
So does Hamish.
Oh God. Seriously. I mean, I literally argue with it, especially now that it has a voice. Oh, it's great. When you say like, okay, so you repeat it, you say something, you give it a process, and then you say it a different way. But where are you doing that? Like, where exactly are you doing that? In a document?
No. So it's here. It's in the instructions. Okay. So this might not be the best example because this is a simple ChatGPT, custom GPT. So I'll go to the content, write instead, and you'll see just how much you have to repeat yourself to actually get what you want. So you can write something 3 times and it will still completely ignore what you're saying. So you do also have to understand that there's only so much you can do as well. So this one was a real pain. Basically, when you're prompt engineering, you need to cover every single possible angle for it to not do something or not understand the instructions. So I'm going to go through this prompt, and you can ask me any questions anytime. But I will just try and go through this prompt to explain the thought process. The reason that this exists at the top, where I say your objective is to write one comprehensive article, I'll share this actually in the chat. You can play around with it as well. Okay, I'll put that in the WhatsApp.
So you're putting in instructions, pressing save, testing it, and then changing the instructions.
Yes, exactly. So this started off with me writing only this part here. Okay, actually, I'm really glad you just asked me that. I'll show you how this prompt started because I can remember exactly how it started. And then you can see how much extra fluff I have to add in order for it to actually understand what it's doing. So it started off literally like this. This was the prompt at the beginning. Okay, so if you remember what I said at the beginning, you have to break it down into easy, digestible steps. So that's exactly what I did. I broke it down. This is the easiest way to get ChatGPT to write an article, an informational article. This is purely informational just because that's what people were asking for at the time. These are the steps, right, which I talked about before on Excel Draw. So I pressed generate and I thought, it's what it was doing was it was generating a part of the article and then just going straight into the conclusion. And it wasn't very long. So I had to say you have to use every header from the outline in the article because otherwise the article will not be complete. And then it still wasn't doing it. So I added this point here at the top.
The GPT will ask you these questions.
Yeah.
And here in this instruction, you're telling it how to then formulate the answers to those.
Yeah.
Okay, so it is asking me the questions one by one.
Yeah.
So you're telling it to ask these questions to the user. So how does the user start out? Like if you're creating this for the general public to use in the store, do they have instructions on how to use this to get proper, output? Or
if you imagine it's like a conversation, the GPT is going to ask the first question to the user, and that's going to kick them off. So they don't need to know how to use it because it's going to ask the questions. Hamish, why don't you show the opening screen of your one?
Well, I can do better than that. It says, give me your website to start. So I say twomen.it, and it searches on Bing to understand the context of my business. So this is a really important part of this because obviously when you're writing for clients, you want to talk about the client's business, but ChatGPT doesn't know what 2Men is. If you just ask ChatGPT what 2Men is, it probably doesn't know. It might know now because it's been updated. So it searches that and then it understands exactly what it is. It's an online retail platform specializing in Italian classic sartorial menswear fashion, which is exactly what 2Men is, by the way. It's literally exactly what 2Men is. And then at the bottom of this generation, it should say, what is the keyword. And then you give it the keyword and it will then search the keyword and it will look at competitors and it will try and understand if there's a pattern in their headers. And if there is, it will give you like a table. I kind of want to focus on actually how you make this, but do you understand how this works now? It's GPT output and there's user input. The user input affects the GPT output during the process.
And you're not using any actions connecting this with anything.
No, it's connected on, I'm using these web browsing, DALL-E, and code interpreter. So an action, I don't use actions at all because I just don't find them consistent. And then let's talk about the second part of this, because there's the first part of the prompt, and then I would say there's the second part of the prompt, which is this part here. It's just giving points. And these are the most important points. So you are SEO writer GPT. You strictly write content which is SEO optimized and can rank on Google. Strictly only use an internal link once. Strictly space out internal links throughout the article. Strictly use logic and keyword rich anchor text for all internal links. Strictly use H1 headers and then H2, H3. Create a takeaways table. Interesting content. I don't know why it has burstiness and creativity. I hate that thing.
It's got us into so much trouble.
I was so annoyed about that. Like, people were obsessed with it, and I told them over and over, you don't need to use it. But
guys, you've no idea. Like the other day, we delivered 390,000 words of content to a client because of this burstiness and creativity prompt. All the German, Dutch, and French was just like way off.
Gobbledygook.
Yeah, and German's burstiness and creativity is just not something that you put into German. Like, so.
Strictly do not converse with me. This is quite an important one. So just write content. Do not conclude the content until the final generation of the article. Create tables and lists. Strictly at the end of the article, say, do you want me to visualize data? Ask if you want a featured image. The generations are to get one complete article. So never repeat yourself over generations. This is important. Never use an internal link more than once. So these are the 4 steps. And then you have to give it like the commandments, the rules. Don't use negatives. So always strictly focus on, try to use these words. It works better than using negatives. Using negatives doesn't work that well with prompt engineering. So that's kind of like an overview of a topic that's infamously hard to explain, which is how to create quite a complicated thing. I hope that was useful in terms of how GPTs work, etc. You can use XML markup like this to tell to ChatGPT, this is the mission. And then if you say, if you do not follow mission, you have failed. This can work quite well as well. Like, it seems weird, but it can actually work quite well. Another thing you can do with XML markup is mark things like code, for example, and then you can refer to the code like this in the prompts. That's quite a useful thing as well. Over explaining, because like I said, you have to repeat yourself. So a lot of these things are repeated over and over and over until I got the perfect generation like 10 times in a row. That was how I went on. Conversation starters. This is a good way, like how to explain to a user how to use your custom GPT. Let's say you make a calculator to help people with debt, like a personalized debt calculator / advisor. You can say, how much do you earn in a year? And then they can click that and that'll send the message to ChatGPT. And you can have the instructions being based on when someone tells you how much they earn in a year, do this calculation. So I think like a calculator or something like that would actually work quite well, because I think that's a really, really good way to bring some traffic in. Another thing that you can do with conversation starters is if you find a good way to consistently have the same experience with ChatGPT or with the custom GPT, if you find it a good way to start a good conversation, for example, a large prompt, you can just put it here and then send it as the first and potentially only message on the custom GPT. Now, WG, you mentioned knowledge as well. I think this is something that we need to talk about because I think there's a common misconception with knowledge. This doesn't work as well as people want it to work. You cannot feed it a huge PDF and then expect it to draw specifics or use that knowledge to then generate a specifically styled article. For me, in my experience, it just hasn't worked that well. So it's not very good at taking large amounts of information and then stylizing an article based on that information or formatting. What it is good at is giving specific information to reference. For example, it's really, really good if you give it a list of internal links in a .text file. It's really, really good if you give it this article here, which is just an example of one of our best performing articles on 2Men, using that as a way just to understand the format that I wanted to use. The thing that I found it best for is definitely understanding or using internal links or product. Remember that you can do this in an actual conversation window. I found knowledge to be one of the weaker parts of custom GPTs. It's only good at doing internal links, basically. Web browsing. Web browsing is absolutely vital for one reason. ChatGPT doesn't know about every business. If we just go on ChatGPT, so again, this is a huge website and ChatGPT doesn't recognize it. So that's why I love web browsing, because we write for a lot of clients. ChatGPT might not know who they are. So you can just allow ChatGPT to read their website and understand what it is. And you can do this with your website. If it can't find it on Bing, you need to get yourself indexed on Bing. This is such an important thing because you can do this with knowledge, but in my opinion, it's better to feed ChatGPT run your website and allow it to understand what it does by reading it itself. This is really, really important. ChatGPT is better at working with things it genuinely understands rather than working with things that you're telling it is true. So if you say 2Men is a classic menswear website, it will understand that, but it doesn't understand any context beyond that. So if you allow ChatGPT to understand itself what 2Men is, it's much more effective. It's much more useful. Another interesting use of web browsing is to have completely up-to-date information. If you're writing about a trending topic, or if you've got a news website or whatever it might be, this can be absolutely essential. Anything after April 2023. DALL-E image generation, this is just easy. It speaks for itself. Either you need image generation or you don't. Code interpreter. I want to talk about this one a little bit because I do think it's overused. It can be tempting to just turn all of these on and just expect ChatGPT to deal with it. But sometimes code interpreter can actually be a hindrance instead of a help. This is because it's sometimes used when you don't want it to be. A good example of this is when you want ChatGPT to have a feeling and to give an opinion on a selection, for example, which internal links are relevant to an article. And what it does instead is it uses Python logic to randomize the internal links. And what that can do is the end result, instead of being an internal link to a suits collection, it could be an internal link to swimming trunks in an article about suits. So you have to be really, really careful with code interpreter. Often we want context, but code interpreter uses logic-based decision-making instead, which we don't necessarily want. So if you sometimes see, oh, it's using code interpreter, and then the results are not very good, the reason is because you're expecting decision or context-based reasoning, and it's using logic instead. However, code interpreter is really, really good for scraping web pages for keywords or information. It can be used for a number of different things. If I'm doing something specific, I will always ask myself if I need code interpreter or whether I just want to add it because it's cool. And then actions, like I said before, I haven't really used actions at all because I'm not a coder. I haven't really had the chance to play with it properly. But I do know that if you want to do something like a stock market checker or whatever it might be, then it might be useful to have actions in order to give reliable data. Okay, so now we're going to talk about something that is almost impossible to teach, but I will do my best. How to actually prompt engineer. This really is the million-dollar question, but unfortunately, it's more of a feeling than a science. Prompt engineering is almost an incorrect word because really it's just prompt creation. However, just like creative writing training, there are some techniques and methods I've picked up that might be useful. Prompt engineering is a process of refining a prompt in order to get the desired output. There are a few ways to prompt engineer, but my favorite is the playground. Inside the playground, we can build prompts and easily test them out by sending a call to ChatGPT API and seeing the result. You can also use assistants in the API. So you can create an assistant the same way that we talked about before, and you can test it out that way as well. But I probably wouldn't recommend that because it's actually really, really slow. Instead of teaching you how to prompt engineer in one go, I'm instead going to talk about ways and modifiers to prompts and how to test them out and how to get exactly what you want. Okay, so we'll skip past that part. Being careful with prompt engineering. ChatGPT responds in a weird way depending on how you word things. I cannot stress this enough. You can have one word in your prompt that ChatGPT reads literally, and it will just change the entire output. This has happened to me a million times. I have changed one word in a prompt, and it's just had a completely different output. Just be really careful with how you word things. Write like you're writing to an idiot. Okay, you have to give it really, really clear instructions. If you say something like list internal links throughout the article instead of sprinkle internal links naturally throughout the article, it will change the output. You should be extremely literal with your wording.
Any question, guys? Throw them in the chat. Yeah.
Oh, I wasn't reading WhatsApp. Sorry, guys. I hope people
No,
haven't been writing questions.
No, it's all good.
Another part of this is positive and negative prompting and the use of absolutes. You should use absolutes like always and never. This is what I was talking about on Excel Draw as well. This has changed a little bit. These aren't necessarily all absolutes. Always is an absolute, but strictly in focus on aren't really. So yeah, an absolute is like a way to tell ChatGPT that this is an important part of the process. Sometimes ChatGPT will ignore you anyway. This is so important to understand and remember. No matter how many times you fight with it, no matter how many times you tell it the same thing, it will produce different results. I don't know why. It's so frustrating. It makes me sad. But so there's no real way to have 100% consistency. As much as we want 100% consistency, sometimes it'll ignore your system instructions. Sometimes it'll just ignore what you've said here. Sometimes it'll just ignore these for no reason and just not include internal links. It is what it is. And you just have to prompt it again to say you've forgotten something. So that's an important part of this as well. Oftentimes it will forget to internal link, and I just say to it, this is good, but why haven't you included internal links? And then I just send that message and it includes the internal link. Use always and never to ensure ChatGPT understands. This works particularly well in custom instructions or system prompts or custom GPT system. Make sure to put the right part of the instruction in the right part of ChatGPT. Burstiness and creativity. So this produces content that frankly a lot of brands will not like or appreciate. And while it supposedly looks more human and past AI detectors, I think it's bullshit and produces content that isn't considered to be readable in English, in French, or German, in any language. These two words that I was convinced by people to start using in my ChatGPT prompts has really brought a lot of problems. So I would just say do not use burstiness and creativity. Google doesn't care. Okay. So this burstiness and creativity thing, it's a myth. It's just not necessary to even bother about. Okay, so here's some examples of what works well for me in prompts. Write in clear, understandable English. Also, I need to add write at a grade level. So you say 1 to 15, although you probably don't want 1 to 15 actually thinking about it. You probably want like 6 to 11. So you can say write in a 6th grade or level English or German. This was supposed to fix the problem with burstiness and creativity, but it hasn't quite worked, but it's okay. Right, from a first person plural perspective, this is the most common tone of voice that people use for content, which is we, us, our, etc. This is first person plural. Someone like DubG might write from the first person perspective. I, my, mine. Most people write from a first person perspective. They don't write from any other. Engage users and ask and answer questions relevant to the topic. I found that works really, really well. You want it to write engaging content, right? As if you were writing for a magazine, which I found helps even further with the engaging content thing. Grade of language translation prompts. By adding a grade modifier to the prompt, you can lessen the level of language, making it more accessible. Like I talked about before, this works particularly well with translating into different languages. German, Italian, etc. By saying give me it in grade 7, you can easily output the German. Write as the grade 7 level German. Write as the grade 8 level German. Don't translate the content word for word. Write it again at a grade 7 level of German. Avoid literal translation. How to get ChatGPT to output consistently as possible. You can either use in custom instructions or the system prompt as well is the best place to achieve this. And then another little point here is getting useful information from your business or site. So WG, you asked me before, how do you get the HTML of your website? Now, I talked about this in the video, but if you have all of your important pages at the top, because all of these links are here, if you inspect this page, you will find...
Wait, can't hear you.
Yeah, we lost you there, Hamish. The ragtaggle crew here.
Or hit mute by accident.
Maybe. No, it doesn't say he's muted. Pretty genius level stuff he's going through though right now. Wow.
Yeah, he's got a ton of knowledge. It's so hard to follow him on YouTube though. It's like, oh wait, what?
Yeah.
What did you just do? What did you just? What do you mean? Like so
Yeah.
many.
Hello. Sorry,
Okay.
guys.
Okay. No worries, man.
How long was I gone? I was probably just
not long
talking
at
like
all.
10
Not long
minutes.
at all. It was just
Okay.
as you noticed the issue with the two-man menu.
Right.
But then WG was just saying, I think you were saying that you find these valuable, right? Because you're like being able to just like stop Hamish for a second and ask a question, which you can't do on
Yo,
YouTube.
stop. What did you just say?
Yeah, sorry. Say that again and explain it for 5 minutes. All right, Hamish, you can
It's
continue,
good.
man.
The last part of this is simple versus complicated GPTs. Now, I want to talk about this because I think this is something that a lot of people might be getting hung up on. I have made 14 GPTs so far. You can see I've experimented a lot with them, trying to understand the best way to make them. And I would say there are two distinct categories. There is a simple GPT and there is a complicated GPT. So this one here that now has 5,000 uses, which is crazy, is a complicated GPT, like I talked about at the beginning. I know I mentioned this at the beginning, but I think it's worth going into a bit more detail, because if you try and overcomplicate your GPTs when it's not needed, you're going to run into issues, which is something that I think probably happens quite a lot. So we'll open two GPTs at the same time. You can see the difference between them. So I'm going to go for the original topical authority generator. I think I'm going to have to upgrade my plan. It's a bit of a scam. You have to pay for 2 seats, but I think it might be worth it. I'm definitely thinking about paying for ChatGPT Teams on my personal account. So this is a simple GPT. It's very, very simple. It just sets out the steps and then it gives the kind of external instructions to those steps. Okay, so this was the original topical authority generator, and it's you can see it's a very, very simple set of instructions. I made it more complicated. The end result was not great, so this one is actually better. You need to think about whether you need a complicated custom GPT or a simple custom GPT. If your output doesn't have to be high quality written content, I would probably recommend looking at doing a simple ChatGPT. If your output needs to be complicated and you need it to do like a million different things, it might actually be best instead to use a complicated GPT, which is what this one is right here. So yeah, interestingly, I am now on the ChatGPT store. I hope that can do something. I'd be really interested to see overall how this ranks and if this actually does anything. It's crazy, but yeah, some of them are useful, some of them are not so useful, I guess. So wait, just before we go on, just quickly before we go on, I think this will be a huge monetization opportunity for people. So if obviously I have the advantage of having the YouTube channel, so I can direct people to use it, and that's why it's actually number 12, because 5,000 people have already used it. But I just think it's still an interesting one to look out for, and I think people could rank on Google with it. Okay, guys, I think we're gonna call it there because me and Ron have had a extremely long day of meetings and a little bit tired. So yeah, we'll call it there.
Guys, thank you all so much for your time, and we'll see you next week.